And people learn, and I think they grow. So maybe the moment of this confusion today is only temporary. It will change very soon. Look at such a small example, food. In the past, simple people were happy when they were able to have enough calories. They couldn't allow themselves to be capricious, to have choices. They were happy when there was something to eat because humanity was hungry. Upper class was well fed and immediately developed certain restrictions and limitations. It was not allowed to eat, at least in my family, to eat between meals. And it was not allowed to eat excessively. Now, in mass society, starting with the United States, obesity is a great social problem. 50% of Americans are obese because they haven't inherited a restriction. They don't know that if you have enough, you don't take it all. And that's why they become fat. And that's a question of culture, not of medicine. It is just a question that they have no culture that forces them to limit what is accessible. We have lots of such basic changes in modern society in the last 50 years. That there is abundance of food, but there is also another change which has enormous impact on culture. It is relationship to sex. Since conception has been introduced and made available to whole society, the whole culture of sexual relationship has changed. In history, for many reasons, and sociologists are better in defining why people were afraid of procreating bastards, what consequences it had for family life, for the survival, for the feeding of the next generation. So there was some restricted order imposed on sexual life, and women had to be very thoughtful about entering into intercourse to avoid pregnancy. This is gone, and sexual life banalized. So when we look back now on 19th century, life of the greatest poets, it was usually love, disappointment that was behind the greatest achievements of human talent. It was usually some sort of frustration that brought people to so many inventions. Now, sexual instinct may be easily satisfied already in the secondary school. So there is no tension. And some feminists insist that men should be more effeminized and that women should be more masculine. So at the end, we will have unisex society with no sexual attraction whatsoever. I am rather afraid of that. However, I want to make a distinction, and this is my own invention. I try to compare feminism to cholesterol. There is a good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So definitely there is good feminism and bad feminism. I quoted the bad one, but the good one is existing, and I will subscribe to it. So modern society is free of these basic preoccupations of the past. How to survive. In a developed society, it is almost impossible to die of hunger. I don't want to be cynical. Some people die of hunger, but mostly because they've been neglected, not noticed by somebody. But usually, in all developed countries, somebody will come with help and some food will be given. So this has vanished. We will have place to survive when temperature is low, and sex became banal, so it is not a real problem. However, with all these elements that has changed, something new must emerge because we lost some balance as humanity, I'm afraid. We will face some major problems with the survival of our species. And that's what is, to me, interesting and very, disturbing. When I look on decline of mass media, television, I will quote another rather exclusive experience I had. I was honored to entertain Prince of Wales during his visit in the 90s to Poland. And it was a time of his separation with Lady Diana, and he was followed by all possible televisions of the world looking for sensation. And together with the Prince, we have seen on television in British Embassy, in private, of report of his visit on CNN or maybe some other chain. I don't want to incriminate them, but it was made the same day. And this report, this broadcast, was openly suggesting that Prince Charles is looking for a sex affair with his lady bodyguard who was with him in the trip. And I must say we were all deeply embarrassed. The editing of the material was strongly suggesting this. It was not enough to make a cause, because they are shrewd and clever. However, it was giving the public a great explanation. Why did he make a trip to Poland? He made a trip to Poland to get to the very muscular lady who was his bodyguard. Totally idiotic. I spent a couple of hours with Prince Wales. I know what his agenda was. It was least probable scenario. And Prince of Wales was kind enough to ask me, Mr. Zanussi, you are a script writer. Would you put such a story to your script? And I said, no, by no means. My sense of realism tells me this is not likely to happen. And of course he said, I'm not a sex maniac, and however my life is not exemplary, this is making out of me a total idiot. And he made a beautiful remark, that's why I quoted. He said, why at the time when public was so uneducated, Shakespeare was writing about my ancestors, many of them real criminals, but he was writing text which is meaningful even today because it is true to life. It is looking for deeper truth. And why I today, at a time when most of the public has higher or middle education, when there are no illiterate viewers of television, my life is presented as a soap opera, totally unrealistic, idiotic, scandalous. I wonder, because that's true, that the audience of Shakespeare was often very simple. But this audience was bound to look for truth and sense. And audience today, in this very fortunate time of history, may effort to be frivolous, to tolerate stupidity. And this is something, what I would say, is a new factor. This factor has only now emerged. And I'm very upset about it. My education was different. But my education is old-fashioned. I am 71, so I belong to the very old generation. And I remember my father, who was telling me, he was definitely formed before World War I and World War II. But when a book was declared to be bestseller, he was saying, let us give it to the maid or to a driver or throw it to the garbage. It was inconceivable to read a bestseller. If the general public has low taste, and we know it has, why should we read it? If it sells well, it cannot be good. And it is not good. If something is a bestseller, it cannot be a good literature. We know it even now. However, my grandmother was even more surprised because she has heard that father says, give it to the maid. And she said, do maids read our days? Because when she was young, maid was always illiterate, so there was no market to write trash literature for this public, because this public was not reading anyway. So the basis of the public has enlarged. And of course it is better to read trash than not to read anything. But from another hand, however, this is doubtful assertion, but this has changed dramatically, and we are under enormous pressure of mass audience and mass public believing that if they are many, they are right. And from the other hand, I will blame our well-being for frivolity of our culture and of our problems. And this is something what I see depicted, reflected in culture very strongly. Public today tends to duck all existential and basic questions about our existence, about sense, about God. We have substitute problems. I think they are substitute. We talk about tolerance. Tolerance is a nice thing, but very, I would say, very modest. It is not a real great value. Because when you talk about culture, tolerance is included. If you have good manners and if you have good feelings to people, you don't need to talk about tolerance. You have it for granted. But I have an experience, which is my private experience. I have 9 dogs, most of them Labradors. All these dogs are naturally selected to hunt for birds. And they bring me hens from the neighborhood. I have to pay to the owners. And unfortunately, with the use of the cane, I try to teach my Labradors tolerance. I have a success. I don't need to eat broth of chicken anymore because my Labradors leave hens alone. So they are tolerant. But I will never be able to teach them love to chicken. Here, can is not enough. And in our heritage of culture, in Christian tradition, we have love as an ultimate criterion of our humanity. So we have to treat with love other people, and tolerance will come out naturally. There is no reason to talk about it so much as it is told today, especially because tolerance is applied to the, I would say, gray sphere, because good things don't need to be tolerated. They are embraced and welcome anyway. Bad things should not be tolerated. So only something what is between is the subject of tolerance. So there's too much to me, too much noise about something what is in fact not substantial. We talk a lot about minorities. It is important. We have to treat other people well as we treat everybody. Again, culture covers it without any specification. But when I see very frivolous people asking